perhaps one of the most influential people in music in our history, Ludwig van Beethoven was born in Bonn, Germany, December 16, 1770. This composer composed music from the 19th century, the late 19th century, to the early 20th century. His father was a failed musician compared to his grandfather. So this is believed to be the reason why Beethoven was forced to stay inside the majority of his young life and work on his music. Where he wanted to improvise, his dad said, no, you have to read the music. He saw no value in improvisation, which plays a role later in Beethoven's life because he becomes a very, very, very prominent composer. In 1792, Beethoven began to work under Joseph Haydn. From this time to 1813, we see Beethoven develop his style. He takes the high classical music of this time, and we see him convert it into his own. He makes it his own style. His music, because of this, was criticized for being too complex. He would take it much further. The dynamics were always changing, whereas usually in the classical style, the dynamics would start soft and then gradually build up. Beethoven didn't abide by this law. He changed back and forth. His music was so complex, in fact, that in 1790, after writing a memorial piece for Joseph II, an emperor at the time, the orchestra he worked with would not play it because it was too complex. Specifically, the woodwinds had a hard time playing it. At the age of 28, as we all know, Beethoven started to lose his hearing. He started to notice this at the height of his success, which was very traumatizing for him. It was not something he liked, and because of this, he went to rest his ears in a summer home for a summer, and he wrote the Heiligenstadt Testament, which was written in 1802. This was Beethoven's way of expressing himself. He jotted down his depression, his thoughts of suicide. He was a composer, and he found it almost insulting that, this would happen to him as opposed to anybody else. But after coming out of this series of depression and his thoughts of suicide, he wrote pieces that blew away the audiences that were waiting for him to come back. He wrote the Christ on the Mountain of Olives and the Eroica Symphony. Now, the Eroica Symphony was 60 minutes long, as opposed to 30 minutes, which is usually how long orchestras lasted. This was a monster of a piece that just befuddled everyone that listened to it. And even some of the people that listened to his music and loved it said, you can have too much of a good thing. Even his patrons. In 1801, he wrote his Moonlight Sonata, which reflected his love life. It was very sad and passionate, and Beethoven, being the antisocial person he was, he had always been away from people. He didn't learn how to socialize. So love for him didn't really happen. He did dedicate the Moonlight Sonata to a married countess whom he supposedly loved, and there's theories of affairs with his cousins and just a series of information and letters that were written that suggest that perhaps at one point he might have had a child. During his later life, when he had lost most of his hearing, Beethoven wrote some of his greatest works. The Fifth Symphony and the Ninth Symphony, for example, are considered some of the most, they're the best examples for Beethoven. Everybody at some point has heard the Fifth Symphony. In 1815, a 5-year custody battle began between him and his stepsister after his brother had died over the nephew. After winning said custody battle, he he took care of his nephew, and at the age of 19, his nephew tried to commit suicide because Beethoven was sort of smothering him. You have to understand, this boy was the only person Beethoven had really relative wives beside his friends. So after his nephew tried to commit suicide, Beethoven died in Vienna March 26, 1827, at the age of 56, in the middle of a thunderstorm. Now, poets dream and talk about how Beethoven was conducting this thunderstorm as he passed, because it was much like his music. It was beautiful, yet it was chaotic, and it had an edge to it. 20,000 people attended his funeral. This shows how much the people of Vienna adored Beethoven. And today, Beethoven's music is studied and enjoyed across the globe.